We expect the Americans to somehow launch a WMD against the country that launches one against us. I mean, that's a huge expectation. And nations don't do that unless the junior nation is valuable enough to them. And that certainly is a risk for Australia. Look, with Trump, I was always sympathetic to his view of alliances, not because I want him to break up the alliance system, but he does not have the sentimental view that just because the United States has 30 plus allies, it's automatically in a better position than its rivals like China. He has the view that you've got to look at what allies bring to the table and whether it's a net gain or a net liability for the United States. And that is harsh, but I think it's appropriate because, as you mentioned, if we expect American blood and treasure to be used for our interests, they have a right to actually ask, what do we actually bring to the table? And these 70 years of mateship and what we've done in the past, that just doesn't matter to this administration. Look, it's uncomfortable for us, but it actually speaks to a reality of national politics. Alliances matter because they enhance the hard power of all parties.
All parties.
If it doesn't...
Which is the answer to those who say, by the way, if something goes wrong, Australia can't do anything.
Yeah.
Isolated, no.
Well, I mean, you think about our options. We can actually make the alliance work, which actually means we need to do more. That's the best possible situation in terms of maximising our hard power and protection. Or we can go it alone, which would probably cost 3-4 times more in terms of proportion GDP and defence spending than what we currently do. Or we can basically not have a defence force, right? The second option and the third option, the second option is not feasible. And the third option basically means that we get dictated to.
Which was the Greens policy, by the way, in the build-up to the election.
Yeah, and actually the one good thing that happened in the last election was that the Greens don't hold the balance of power. I was very happy for the Labor Party from that point of view to get a majority. But look, if people like that do get their way, Australia becomes a defenceless country that can be dictated to. We went through a terrible time with China, but there were things that China couldn't do to us because of American protection. Imagine a situation where we basically had to say yes to every grievance that China issues to us. That's actually the fate of a lot of countries that don't look after themselves. It could happen to Australia if we're not careful.
That's a really interesting point, because a lot of Australians say, we shouldn't get involved in a conflict over Taiwan. If the Chinese gain that level of ascendancy in the Pacific, that list of 14 demands that they put to us when they had a dispute, we'd have no comeback, would we? That would be the outcome of it.
Yeah, and this is why this is why people like Paul Keating, they throw out red herrings out because they say, China doesn't tend to invade Australia. No, China doesn't, but it doesn't have to, and your national interest isn't just a sum of whether you invaded or not. So let's say China gets Taiwan. It allows a complete breakout into the Western Pacific. Yep. It puts the American position in a far more precarious position. Essentially, China can do it at once. So now imagine what this world looks like. It's not just about Chinese ships circumnavigating Australia whenever it wants. If China now says to Australia, we want to pay half the market price in iron ore, what's to stop them from imposing that? If China now says we want to buy that port or that farm or that mine or that technology, there is nothing that can actually stop the Chinese from actually doing that, right?
Well, a lot of people will say, hang on, but the government can stop them.
No, because China will now have so many coercive tools that China will make it extremely costly in a prohibitive way for Australia to say no. And by the way, this is not hypothetical. There are countries in the region that now have to put up with this. Cambodia, Laos, Thailand even to some extent, right? Do we want to be one of those countries that essentially cannot exercise what we would consider our basic rights of sovereignty? So it's not about being invaded. It's about being completely defenseless in the face of coercion. And that happens if we essentially allow the alliance to lapse. The alliance will lapse if we don't do our part. And of course, in the scenario where China actually takes Taiwan, that's not the beginning. Sorry, that's not the end, that's the beginning Once China takes Taiwan, it's already told us what it's going to do. It's going to keep going. South China Sea, East China Sea and beyond.